Well, again today we're starting with our weekly series Flashpoints with CBS News national security analyst Juan Zarate, who joins me again at the desk, looking at potential hot spots and foreign policy challenges around the world. New sanctions again in Iran. What are these about?
Yeah, Bob, I think this week we've seen the real action on Iran sanctions begin. The U.S. came out with unilateral sanctions going after not just Iranian banking, but their shipping lines, going after the Revolutionary Guard Corps and all of the front companies that we've now exposed. That was then matched by the European Union, surprisingly moving pretty quickly, which is unusual for the EU, to ban investment in oil and petroleum sectors in Iran, which is quite significant.
So these are real sanctions with some teeth.
These will have teeth, and in some ways, the UN sanctions, as I said last week, were really a bit of a hollow victory. But what it did really was it set the table for these sanctions. It allowed the Treasury Department, which has been building these up over time, waiting for the trigger, to be able to then unleash these sanctions. What this will do is not just expose Iranian fund companies and put additional pressure on via the banking system. This now allows the private sector to do what it's been doing over the last 2 years, which is to start withdrawing from activities with Iran, and it will start to hurt. And we're already starting to see, both from some Iranian sources and others, talking about a little bit of worry within the regime, because these are going to start to bite a bit.
Even though they publicly come out and kind of poo-poo them.
Yeah, they would naturally poo-poo these publicly, but I think this is going to start to hurt. Now, the grand question is, does this change the regime's calculus with respect to their nuclear program? I don't think anyone is wholly confident that that's the case, but at least sanctions could perhaps slow their progress, could build some fissures within the regime that might exist, and maybe buy some time. The one thing to watch, though, the Russians were not happy about these sanctions. They saw these as unilateral. They saw them as beyond the scope of the UN deal, and so the Russians were not happy. The Chinese as well may be waiting in the wings to fill in the gaps with some of the investments that may now be withdrawn.
Afghanistan. General Petraeus comes to town. Of course, that was a separate spectacle. He became ill, and they had 2 days of his testimony. Where are we on Afghanistan? Can the United States keep to its timetable, and how are we doing over there?
Well, I think there are two things that have emerged this past week and a half. One is more public displays of growing concern about where our strategy is going. Are we really able to turn the tide in Afghanistan, in particular in the south, in the Helmand Valley region and with Kandahar? The fact that General Petraeus has talked about, and Stan McChrystal have talked about delaying the timetable on the push, the operation, the civilian surge into Kandahar. That's really an indication of some concerns that the strategy may not be as effective as we thought. Secondly, the issue of the timing. The timing is now coming back to the fore. There was a lot of controversy when President Obama announced his surge, and with it announced a July 2011 beginning of the drawdown. Everyone said, what does that mean? How can you do that when you're not even surging yet? You're not quite sure how the strategy is going to work. So all of that now is coming to the fore as people are questioning what our strategy is about.
Crisis on the southwest border, Mexico. We're seeing a year that's even more dangerous, more lethal with killings than last year and the year before. Where is this going?
Well, this is the month of living dangerously in Mexico, I think. Probably the most violent month we will see since President Calderon took power in 2006. 160 people or so killed in about 6 days. Ambush of police officers in the north. Killing of police officers outside of Mexico City. Drug rehab centers being attacked. Really a violent month. And what it's done is it's sparked a debate outside of Mexico and within Mexico as to whether or not the strategy that President Calderon has embarked upon is really working. The strategy of trying to dislodge the power of the cartels, replace it with some semblance of good governance, and to root out corruption. And so President Calderon has now gone on an all-out offensive to defend his strategy, defending not only what he's doing, but also laying some blame on the U.S., saying the demand comes from the U.S., you've got money flows as a result coming south, feeding the cartels, as well as armaments that come across the border that really allow these drug cartels to fight the police in a very aggressive way.
Does this violence abate anytime soon? It seems like it's just on an upward trajectory.
Well, this is the problem, because at some point you would hope that the strategy sees the violence decreasing. But the problem is, and this is how the Calderon government would speak about it, as the drug cartels are dislodged and fractured, they're fighting over the same market. They're fighting over the ability to send drugs into the United States and to profit from it. that has created a lot of violence. In fact, the Mexican officials will tell you that they think about 90% of the violence that has occurred over the last couple of years has really been gang member on gang member, drug cartel on drug cartel. And so I don't see the violence abating anytime soon, in part because the drug cartels are still being fractured. They're still trying to figure out who takes over these markets. And I don't know what this looks like at the end of the day. It's a scary proposition, actually.
And still a lucrative market in the U.S. And finally, you had a point you wanted to make about European Muslims.
Yeah, I think this is something to keep a close eye on. It's something that we've watched over and over for the past couple of weeks and couple of years. And that is, the Europeans are trying to grapple with how they deal with their Muslim populations. And in part, this is manifesting itself in laws and restrictions that are starting to emerge on the manifestation of Muslim identity. The wearing of burqas in public spaces. Barcelona, for example, in Spain, just disallowed the wearing of burqas in public buildings. Spain itself is going to be considering some legislation. France has a bill that's in the works to talk about not allowing the wearing of facial veils in public. Same thing with Belgium. This is an ongoing issue, in part because of the perception of what it means to be Muslim in Europe, whether or not Muslims are accepted in Europe. And you add to that other votes like in Switzerland, where they banned the construction of minarets for the call to prayer, for Muslim prayer. And so this is a big issue, in part as well because Europeans are dealing with a demographic issue. They're getting much older. Their younger population and the growth in population are actually coming from immigrant communities. And so it's creating social tension and social dislocation.
All right, Juan, thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob.